Welcome back to our channel. In this final episode of Kwame and Malaika's story, we witness the tense resolution of the curse and the ultimate fate of their children. Join us as we dive into the drama, emotions and decisions that will determine the future of Malaika's children and the legacy of the chief and Mr. Mabwe's lineage. Several months had passed since the burial of Kwame and Malaika. The chief's remaining children, 5 sons and 3 daughters, approached their father with heavy hearts. They requested a meeting to discuss the future, focusing on the curse Kwame had placed on their family. They asked, "Father, what are your plans regarding Kwame's curse?" The chief answered them with an angry booming voice, and he replied, "I will not be railroaded into changing our traditions. A boyfriend cannot claim children from a married woman. Malaika's children will stay with Mr. Mabwe, their rightful father." And they responded, "But father, are you willing to risk our lineage over this tradition? Kwame's curse threatens our future if we do nothing." The chief dismissed their concerns, convinced that the curse held no real power, and dismissed them by saying, "Enough, this discussion is over." Despite the chief's dismissal, the curse cast a long shadow over them. Strange occurrences and misfortunes plagued the chief's household, deepening the fear and uncertainty among his children. They resolved that have to do something. They cannot ignore this any longer. Desperation led them to seek the counsel of the village elders and the wisdom of the ancestral spirits. The village elders, known for their wisdom and connection to the ancestral spirits, listened intently to the concerns of the chief's children. One of the elders spoke, "Kwame's curse is powerful because it is born of injustice. To lift it, we must seek the truth and honor it." The eldest daughter, tears streaming down her face, speaks with determination. "We must acknowledge Kwame as the true father of Malaika's children. It's the only way to lift the curse." Across the village, tension continued to build as the fate of Malaika's children remained uncertain. The air was thick with anticipation, and whispers of the ongoing dispute spread through the village like wildfire. Mr. Mabwe, resolute in his stance, was soon to face another challenge, this time from within his own family. Mr. Mabwe stood firm, his expression hardening as his relatives gathered around him. The eldest among them, a respected elder with silver hair and a wise gaze, stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with concern. "Mabwe," the elder began, his tone respectful yet insistent, "what are your intentions for Malaika's children?" Mabwe's eyes flashed with defiance. "They are staying with me," he responded stubbornly, "because they are my children." A murmur of discontent rippled through the group. The elder, unperturbed, pressed on. "Consider our lineage. Holding on to them against their true lineage would mean the end of our lineage for us all." But Mr. Mabwe remained unmoved, his jaw set in determination. "I will not give them up," he declared. "They are mine by law and tradition." The relatives exchanged worried glances. They knew that Mr. Mabwe's refusal could deepen the divide within the village and exacerbate the curse's effects. Realizing that reasoning with him was futile, they decided to seek intervention from a higher authority. The relatives, leaving Mr. Mabwe's hut, walked with purpose towards the chief's compound, their faces set with determination. As Mr. Mabwe's relatives approached the chief's compound, they were greeted by the chief's children, who were also on their way to confront Mr. Mabwe. The two groups paused, acknowledging each other's presence with a nod of understanding, and shared with each other what had transpired. The eldest son of the chief spoke first, his voice calm but resolute. "We were just on our way to speak with Mr. Mabwe. It seems we share a common concern." The elder relative nodded. "Indeed, we must resolve this issue for the sake of our lineages. Let us join forces and approach the chief together." With a united front, the group made their way to the chief's hut, determined to find a resolution that would ensure the continuity of their lineages and honor both tradition and justice. Unaware of the turmoil surrounding them, Malaika and Kwame's children continued their lives with a heavy heart. They mourned the loss of their beloved mother, Malaika, whose nurturing presence had been a constant source of comfort. The children, though young, were perceptive and felt the absence of their father, Kwame, whom they had never met. Their days were filled with a mix of sorrow and curiosity as they clung to the few stories they had heard about Kwame, imagining what life would have been like had he been a part of their everyday lives. As they played, they often found themselves daydreaming about living with Kwame's family. The eldest child, a young man, would often sit his younger siblings down and recount tales of their father's bravery and kindness, tales he had overheard from village elders and whispered conversations. These stories painted a picture of a life vastly different from the one they knew. They wondered if living with Kwame's family would bring them closer to the heritage they felt disconnected from, a heritage that seemed so rich and promising. However, the children were blissfully unaware of the battles being fought over their fate. They did not know of the tense meetings and the heated arguments between the chief, his children, and Mr. Mabwe. They were oblivious to the change that loomed over them, threatening their future. Their innocent hearts remained untouched by the political and familial strife that surrounded them. Instead, they held on to hope and dreams, wishing for a day when they could truly understand their place in the world. Desperate to resolve the escalating issue, the chief's children and Mr. Mabwe's relatives organized a grand meeting. Present at the meeting were the chief, his stern demeanor masking the inner turmoil he felt, Mr. Mabwe standing resolutely by his stance, the chief's advisors, Mr. Mabwe's relatives, and the chief's children. The air crackled with anticipation, the weight of their family's future pressing down on everyone's shoulders. "Father," began one of the chief's sons, stepping forward with a determined look, "is your friendship with Mr. Mabwe worth the risk of losing our lineage? Kwame's curse is serious, and we cannot afford to ignore it any longer." His voice, filled with a mix of frustration and urgency, echoed the sentiments of his siblings and Mr. Mabwe's relatives who nodded in agreement. The chief, his face etched with stubborn resolve, glanced at Mr. Mabwe, whose expression mirrored his own defiance. The chief's advisors, who had remained silent observers up until now, finally spoke up, their voices heavy with the gravity of the situation. "The curse threatens us all," one advisor said, his tone somber. "We must consider the continuation of all lineages beyond the confines of tradition and pride. If we do not act wisely, the repercussions could be dire for everyone." The gathering fell silent as the advisor's words hung in the air, pressing upon the hearts and minds of all present. After hours of heated discussion, voices rising and falling like the ebb and flow of a turbulent sea, the chief and Mr. Mabwe began to relent. The gravity of the situation, the impassioned pleas from the chief's children, and the undeniable logic of the advisor's arguments wore down their stubborn defenses. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the meeting place, a reminder of the pressing need for resolution. One of the chief's daughters, her voice steady but filled with a quiet determination, stepped forward. "Father, Mr. Mabwe, we have decided to take Malaika's children to Kwame's family. This meeting is a courtesy. We know you will never fully agree. Once Kwame's children are with their rightful family, we can discuss penalties and compensation. The future of our lineage and the peace of our village depend on this decision." Her words, though firm, carried a note of compassion, seeking to bridge the gap between tradition and necessity. The chief, feeling the weight of collective concern and the looming threat of the curse, realized that a decision had to be made for the greater good of all the families gathered around. The chief's stern visage softened slightly at the sight of the people gathered fighting for their lineage. He knew that this meeting would be pivotal in deciding the future of his family and the village. The chief, his shoulders sagging with the weight of his years and the burden of leadership, sighed deeply. He finally saw reason through the fog of tradition and pride. "Very well," he said, his voice tinged with both resignation and hope. "Let them go. The future of our lineage is more important than holding on to old customs." He looked at Mr. Mabwe, who, though reluctant, saw the sense in the decision. "For the sake of peace and the future," Mr. Mabwe conceded, "I will let Malaika's children go." The air seemed to lighten as the decision was made, a collective sigh of relief rising from those present. The path to healing had begun, paving the way for reconciliation and the restoration of harmony in the affected families. Malaika's children were informed of the decision to send them to Kwame's family. The news hit them with a wave of mixed emotions, leaving them numb and uncertain. They had known no other home but Mr. Mabwe's, and the thought of leaving filled them with anxiety and fear of the unknown. Yet there was also a flicker of hope, a promise of belonging to the family of the father they had heard so much about. Seeking solace, they gravitated towards the baobab tree, a place that had always brought them peace and comfort. Under the sprawling branches of the baobab tree, they sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts. The eldest, taking on a protective role, assured his younger siblings that everything would be all right. They spoke to their parents in hushed tones, expressing their anger at the upheaval and the unfairness of their situation, yet also finding a strange sense of calm in their imagined connection to Kwame. The tree, ancient and wise, seemed to whisper to them, promising a future where they could finally understand their roots and the legacy of their father. It was as if the baobab held the spirits of their parents, guiding them towards a destiny they had yet to fully comprehend. As they sat under the tree, an untold peace enveloped them. They began to imagine their new life, picturing the faces of their father's family, wondering about the stories and traditions they would learn. The fear began to ebb, replaced by a sense of anticipation and resilience. They knew that leaving behind the familiar would be challenging, but they also felt the stirrings of hope. This hope, nurtured by the legacy of their parents, would guide them through the transition, allowing them to embrace their new beginning with courage and grace. Malaika's children packed their belongings and were escorted out of the village by the chief and villagers. As they walked through the village, the children felt the eyes of the forbidden lovers upon them. These villagers who saw in Kwame and Malaika the embodiment of true love, now looked at the children with love and respect. Many of these villagers had been denied their children, who were raised by other men due to the circumstances of their birth. Seeing the chief's acknowledgement of Kwame's children gave them hope that they too might one day claim their own children. The children felt the weight of these expectations, but also the warmth of the village's collective embrace. When they reached Kwame's exile village, the atmosphere shifted from somber to celebratory. They were welcomed by their grandfather, grandmother, Kwame's uncle, and the villagers. The entire village turned out to greet them, their faces beaming with joy and relief. It was a hero's welcome, complete with songs, dances, and offerings of food and gifts. The children felt the love and knew they would be okay. They were embraced by family members they had never met, their hearts swelling with a sense of belonging they had longed for. The journey had been daunting, but standing there, enveloped in the warmth of their father's family, they felt the promise of a bright future. In this new beginning, the children saw the possibility of a life rich with tradition, stories, and the legacy of their parents' love. They understood that their lives would be different, but they were ready to face it with the strength and resilience passed down to them. The villagers' acceptance and the love from their new family members assured them that, despite the hardships and the battles fought over their fate, they were finally home. The children, once strangers to their own heritage, now stood at the heart of it, ready to embrace their legacy and the promise of their new life. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. The story of Kwame and Malaika reminds us of the power of love, tradition, and the difficult choices we must sometimes make. Remember to like, subscribe, and share to keep up with more stories like this one. Until next time, may love, peace, and understanding guide your path. May you find true love like Kwame and Malaika's.